And good morning. It's 7 o'clock. I'm Scott Wally along with Kerry Connolly as we rejoin you here on UPN 38 this morning with continuing coverage of the Boston angle of this story. And of course, Boston very much figures into what happened yesterday. 2 of the 4 hijacked planes took off from Logan Airport early yesterday morning, and this morning Logan Airport is a federal crime scene. And the questions still remain, obviously, straight out of Logan Airport. Scott, how did 2 planes, not 1 but 2 planes, leave Boston and get hijacked? Somehow these people got through with knife-like weapons, apparently in their shaving kits. Many unanswered questions out there this morning. We have sent Dan Ray out there. He is looking into the scene. He will be joining us live. Dan Ray, do we have Dan this morning? I'm going to get Dan in just a moment here as we look at some of the images which continue to astound and amaze. This is not. This is something which really does take some time to absorb the enormity of the evil that has been perpetrated on our country. And you know, as many times as we've seen some of these images, they're still just unbelievable. There is from the Boston Herald this morning, one former FBI terrorist specialist, Robert Fitzpatrick, says that yesterday the hijackers who boarded the flights at Logan may be part of a terrorist cell operating here in Boston. He said the hijackers most likely had help from others who may still be in Boston, and he said that they had to have support, they had to have people on the ground in Boston supporting them, which is a frightening and terrifying thought. Let's get right to Dan Ray now, Scott. He is available. He is live out near Logan Airport. Dan, good morning. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Kerry, and good morning to you, and good morning to Scott. Logan Airport very quiet this morning. No one is being allowed into the airport. We're over here at the Hyatt Harborside Hotel, where Massport pretty much has set up their own information center. We expect to hear from some Massport officials later on during the day. You made some reference to the reports in both Boston newspapers this morning, in the Boston Herald and the Boston Globe. Some indication that yesterday, perhaps through some good luck and good fortune, investigators discovered a vehicle here which contained some information and some suggestion that it might have been used by hijackers. Now, the Herald's reporting this morning that the hijackers actually may have come across the border from Canada. They may have taken some sort of a short flight from Portland, Maine, then come here to Logan Airport. Apparently, a bag of one of the individuals who now are suspects did not make the connecting flight, and inside that bag there was information which leading investigators to believe that perhaps some Arab men were involved in this. Inside that bag that was discovered, according to the newspapers this morning, was a copy of the Quran, and also there was a manual as to how someone would fly a commercial airline. So lots of questions being raised here at Logan Airport. A lot of federal investigators here. What we clearly do know is that 2 of the flights, the 2 flights that crashed into the World Trade Center towers in New York yesterday, emanated from Logan Airport, leaving just a little under 24 hours, a little over 24 hours ago from this airport on what would have been a very calm morning just like today. And of course, as a consequence of that, as well as the 2 other hijacked flights, the one out of Newark and the one out of Washington, D.C., which crashed into the Pentagon, all air traffic in this country is shut down. Now, some people have reported that they have heard some airplanes overhead, and what we're told is that there are some special medical flights, and also there are some flights coming into Logan Airport with people who are experts in psychological, emotional counseling. Across the airport at the Hilton Hotel, many of the family members, close relatives of those who perished in those 2 flights, on those 2 flights out of Logan yesterday, have been housed. And here at Massport headquarters, over just across the other side of the hotel, here at the Harborside Hyatt, Massport has set up their information headquarters. So we will be here certainly throughout the day. We will have Logan Airport staffed This story really starts at Logan Airport. Tragically, lots of questions about how security could have been breached at two separate terminals here at Logan Airport, at the United Airline terminal and at the American Airline terminal. I'm sure we're going to get more information on this throughout the day. We probably won't have definitive answers for days, perhaps weeks, maybe even longer. But I suspect that as this day goes on, more and more information will be coming out of Logan Airport, and we'll be here to bring it to you. For now, Dan Ray live at Logan Airport. Back to you, Scott and Kerry.
Dan, a few of us have never used Logan Airport on at least one occasion, taken a flight, and you wonder if if we haven't flown under some false sense of security. It really shakes your confidence in the people who are entrusted with the safety of air travelers. And it's important to note that it's the airlines themselves, am I correct, that are responsible for the safety in their terminals and at their gates, right?
That's correct, Scott. Basically, the relationship here at Massport is the property owner. They own the runways, they own the buildings here at Massport, they own the control tower, but they lease, they would lease part of a terminal to one airline, they would lease whatever needs to be leased. There are restaurants here that are leased. So basically, Massport is a big landlord. The airline, under the FAA regulations, is responsible for the security at the terminal that they lease. So the people who you and I see, and other people in our audience who go through Logan Airport on a frequent or an infrequent basis, the people who you see there in the security guards, they basically are hired often from other companies, security companies. They are hired. Now, when we talked to Bob Weiss a few minutes ago, the publisher, the editor of the Airport Journal, he made a point to me which was astounding, and that is that there's a 100% turnover in the people who basically scan us, scan our belongings, scan our luggage as we go through the security checkpoints at Logan Airport. It's also interesting to note that many of those employees are really compensated at the very low end of the wage scale. For many of them, it is first jobs. For many of them, they are first generation people here basically trying to start up the rungs of the economic ladder. The airlines apparently have chosen to not hire the most qualified people in these positions, and whether or not that contributed to the security lapses here at Logan, or whether or not the terrorists would have gotten through, whether you had the National Guard or the state police there, I'm sure will be an issue that will be litigated by lawyers in court many years to come. For now, Dan Ray live out at Logan Airport. Back to you, Scott and Kerry.
All right. Dan Ray, thank you for that live report from the airport this morning and some of the insight out there. If you were in downtown Boston yesterday, you may have been one of the many, many people that had to leave the building. Just the traffic alone leaving the city proved that many, many buildings were evacuated, Scott. It was really like a ghost town there yesterday morning. Lots of people obviously very, very fearful after seeing the horrific news out of New York City.
Yeah, folks who work in skyscrapers all over the country. The Sears Tower in Chicago, the nation's tallest building, obviously put on a high alert here. Here in Boston, there was an orderly evacuation of the Pru, the Hancock Tower, other buildings around town. Christina Hager's in Boston this morning with more from downtown. Christina?
Well, Scott, the people we've been talking with out here this morning say it is going to be tough to return to work. Again, all those people who work in the prominent high-rise buildings here in the Back Bay, back to work, those buildings back open after thousands were evacuated from them yesterday. We're talking about buildings like the Prudential, you see behind me, and the John Hancock building nearby. Acting Governor Jane Swift has called in stress counselors to help those who work in these buildings with their transition back to work today. Again, expected to be a tough transition. We spoke with one man who was out here early this morning on his morning walk, and he was a good example of just how emotional people are about this, how people are thinking about what has happened, even though we are not at the center of the destruction. He was a World War II veteran who broke down crying as he spoke to us about what had happened.
I was around when they dropped the atom bomb. Harry Truman said, in order to protect millions of servicemen, the invasion of Japan, we're going to devastate the country. Same thing happened in New York City. And I see the Palestinians yelling and screaming with joy. I remember the joy that we were showing in America when the atom bombs were dropped, killing hundreds of thousands of people.
Some heavy hearts, as you can see, as people try to return to their lives today and return to their offices. Now, Acting Governor Jane Swift will be back at the State House today after working from the state bunker in Framingham all day yesterday. And again, city and state employees are all back to work today. That's the latest from here in the Back Bay. Christina Hager, WBZ-4 News. Back to you, Scott and Carrie.
All right, Christina, thank you. It is 7:09 now. Bay State doctors, nurses, and medical technicians are on a mission of mercy to New York.
More than 50 members of the UMass Disaster Medicine Assistance Team left for New York City about 1:30 this morning. They're taking medical supplies with them and will set up a field hospital in the heart of the disaster zone in Lower Manhattan. Many of these volunteers have worked on other disasters, but they have never experienced anything like this.
I think we're really in unknown territory because of the magnitude of this disaster. We aren't really sure what the medical needs will be of these people. This is like a major earthquake occurring in a very populated part of our country.
Field hospital can run for 3 days at a time. A second or third team may be sent out if they are needed. Of course, there is also a need for blood, and I believe the Red Cross is asking for blood donations starting tomorrow here in Boston. O positive and O negative especially, but any kind of blood will be welcome.
Right, there is a Red Cross on the corner of Washington and Nealon in downtown. Scott, I drove by it yesterday. There must have been 100 people online there, so it's nice to see how everybody pulls together at a time, obviously, of great need.
We're going to break from the news for just a moment now and get another check on our Wednesday morning weather forecast with Barry Burbank.
Good morning, Scott and Carrie. Good morning, everybody. It's a nice, clear morning, but it's a cool one. We got many 40s out in the suburbs. We've got a 45-degree reading at Bedford, Massachusetts right now. It's 59 in the city of Boston, and it is 60 down in New York City. In both cities will be sunny and nice today with very light breezes and not much going on. You can see a 43 down in Norwood as well, but a 62 in Hyannis. In terms of cloud cover, we have most of the clouds from Erin out at sea, and Erin moving slowly towards the east now. We'll look to the west to see where our weather coming from, and there is some cloudiness coming in this afternoon, but most of it will be moving across northern New England, and we'll see just a few patches of clouds here by late this afternoon. So basically a sunny day. There'll be a light breeze, but it'll be an onshore breeze, so that'll keep the temperature from going much higher than the upper 60s along the coast to the middle 70s in the western suburbs, also about 77 down in New York City today. Tomorrow will be up in the 70s as well. More cloud cover showing up. Maybe a late afternoon shower, and there will be some showers here into early Friday morning, then very chilly weather for Friday and a little warmer as we get deeper into the weekend. That's your latest forecast.
Great, thank you. And of course, we will have continuing coverage for you. We do want to remind you the MBTA and Amtrak running on schedule this morning. Logan Airport obviously closed, along with all the airports across the country. We'll keep you posted on that. We also have a list of the victims on board the two planes that left from Boston. We will continue to have that updated throughout the morning and, of course, bring you that as well.
Meanwhile, coverage from CBS News in New York continues now, both here on Channel 4, WBZ, and on UPN 38. We will be back with our next local cut-in at 7:25.
Frightened. He was composed. He was trying to convey a message, an urgent message, and not draw attention to himself. I felt that. I hope it didn't result in worse treatment for him. Mark's a very proactive guy. He's a real take-charge guy.
Well, you mentioned that, and you've said that you think your son might have done something that might have helped that flight in some way. What was it?
Yes, he was sitting forward in the aircraft. It was not a very full aircraft. I know from past experience with him that he will try to act in a situation that is an emergency situation. He'll do something. We have it from other sources that another man called. His wife told him that they were going to try to do something, and one passenger was already dead, and they were going to try to do something to thwart these guys. I hope Mark was able to take part in that. And you note that Flight 93 was the only flight that did not make it to some target destination. I'm hoping, we all here hope very much that perhaps the passengers did have a role in that, and that Mark was able to take an active role in stopping these people from killing people on the ground.
Alice Hoagland, I really appreciate your time this morning, and my best to you and your family as you continue through this.
Thank you very much.
Among the thousands of victims in the Twin Towers attack were the many who were fortunate enough to escape the buildings in time. Adrian Vasquez was on the 33rd floor of 2 World Trade Center when the second tower was hit. Her husband, John, had gone to find her and ended up lending a hand on the scene before finally being reunited with his wife. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Can you tell me, Adrienne, what you saw when you were in that first tower yesterday morning?
Well, I was, just finished eating breakfast, and you heard what sounded like a plane zoom down, and I just looked out the window because I'm very close, and all of a sudden you just see this huge explosion, and you realize that a plane actually crashed into the window. However, you assumed it was an accident, Our first reaction, we were shocked, and everybody's looking around, not knowing what to do. It was a little early, so it wasn't a full office yet.
And did you immediately try to get out of the building?
Yes.
Down the stairs?
I grabbed my bag, and we went down the stairs, and since we're on the 33rd floor, we've had previous fire drills, so we know to evacuate. And
you heard an announcement in the stairwell that your building was safe.
On the way down, a little more than midway, we heard an announcement that basically let everybody know that a plane actually did hit the One World Trade Center. However, Two World Trade wasn't hit, to please stay calm, and at that point, they told us to stay where we are, and we just proceeded downstairs.
John, you saw the first crash,
right.
and then the second one happened, and you knew your wife was in that building.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
I have to get there as soon as possible. I had to get to the block as soon as possible, no matter what.
And you got there, what did you see?
I got there in 12 minutes. I saw the building was, both buildings at the time really were smoking. I remember asking an FBI agent, how am I going to get closer, that my wife is pregnant and I'm looking for her? And where would you look if it was your wife? And he said, go ahead, go. And I ran straight through. The officer was nice enough to let me through. And I couldn't find her. After the buildings collapsed, I was just standing there with my arms open, like, what am I going to do now?
And you finally found each other?
Yes, luckily I was fortunate to get out, and I ran. He works close, so I ran to his job, but when I got there, he wasn't there, so it was very scary, thinking that maybe something happened to him while he was looking for me. It's just very, it was a rough day.
I can only imagine what you saw along the way.
Oh my God, just people jumping out of buildings, debris everywhere, smoke, you couldn't see everything, and reality, when you finally turn around and you notice that your building was on fire and you were just there a few moments ago, was like, it's a lot to handle.
I'm glad you made it out.
Thank you.
Our best as you continue with your pregnancy.
Oh, thank you.
I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
So do I.
Adrienne and John Vasquez, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is 7:17 Eastern Time. Bryant.
All right, Jane. President Bush is promising to bring those responsible for Tuesday's attacks to justice. Bill Platt is in Washington with more on that. Bill, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bryant. People do look a little numb around here this morning, but the image the White House wants to project is one of determination. We're told that the president came to the Oval Office a little bit after 7 o'clock this morning, Eastern Time, that he's there. He plans some meetings for later today, more about that. But his biggest item on the agenda has to be how to respond, to decide how to respond to what has happened. The president, who began yesterday in Florida, finally headed back to Washington under battle security conditions, a fighter escort plainly visible off each wing of Air Force One. Mr. Bush returned to the White House and from the Oval Office delivered a message to the nation.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve.
The president also had this warning to those responsible for the attack.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
The president will meet this morning with the joint congressional leadership, and we are told that he is going to issue a plea to Americans to donate blood. Brian?
All right, Bill, thanks very much. The fugitive terrorist Osama bin Laden is, as we've said, the prime suspect behind these attacks. Meanwhile, a report out this morning says Massachusetts authorities have identified at least 5 Arab men as suspects in those attacks. Jim Stewart is in Washington with more on that. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Well, the investigation is apparently going forward on 2 tracks. The first is from the CIA, some intercepted communications, which they're not providing any detail about, but which appear to be very persuasive to them that Osama bin Laden was behind this, so persuasive that in fact they have informed the White House that that is their target right now and that that is the person that they think is behind this. The other set that they're pursuing of the set of evidence is really far more compelling. Apparently these aircraft were in the air for so long, Bryant, that many people were making phone calls, some of them providing detail upon detail of what was taking place on those aircraft. They tell us that 3 to 5 hijackers were on many of these planes. They would herd people into the back of the planes. Passengers as well as some crew members were cut. Apparently the hijackers were all armed, according to the callers, with a similar type weapon, a box knife, a little, you open boxes, the blade folds back in, and this is something that they hid apparently in their luggage and took out shortly after takeoff. That's the sort of detail they're looking at and pursuing at this moment.
All right. Jim, thanks very much. We'll get back to you later. In Washington this morning is New York Democratic Senator Charles Schumer. Senator Schumer, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
Well, we're kind of in stunned disbelief around here. Give me your characterization.
Well, it's just hard to believe. We enter different phases of this. We first see the plane go in, the first plane, and you think, oh, it's just some little passenger plane. Then you see the devastation. You can't believe it. And at last night, all day we were down here counting numbers, names of friends and others who, where are they? Because we knew they worked in that building. The 68th floor was evacuated. The 82nd floor was evacuated. And then last night, you start learning the names of people who are gone.
What kind of numbers are you hearing in terms of casualties?
I am hearing horrible numbers that this is going to be far and away the worst killing of civilians from this type of thing ever in America.
Are we talking five figures, Senator?
We may get that at that level, and it's, yes. They had much more success evacuating the first tower of the World Trade Center than they did the second.
Because the second was the one that took the second attack actually was the first to fall.
It was the second. There was much less time between the time the plane hit it and the time it collapsed, yes.
Senator, you've heard the president vow to track down and punish those who executed these attacks. We all stand behind him, but how realistic are our chances of getting that done?
Well, you know, this is going to be a very long action. What happens all too often is, and I speak as somebody who's been concerned with anti-terrorism for a long time, is after we have one of these horrible incidents, we sort of mobilize for 3 or 6 months, and then it's business as usual. This is, as some have said, the second Pearl Harbor, and it requires as long and sustained a response. It's a different type of response, but it requires that. It not only requires going after, and the president was right to say this, not only going after the terrorists who did it, but those that harbor them. For instance, the people who hijacked the plane knew how to fly 767s. They didn't learn that in the mountains of Afghanistan, and if that's where they're from. And so this is going to take a much more sustained action, and it's going to take us really getting our European allies to stop playing games with the Iranians, the Iraqis, etc.
We've got about 45 seconds to get to this, but how bothered are you that our intelligence community didn't see this coming?
Well, we have to sift the evidence. You know, there hadn't been a hijacking here for 10 years. We are supposed to translate, you know, we are supposed to have, NSA is supposed to have great eyes and ears and hear all these things. After the World Trade Center bombing, there was a lack of translators. They had all these tapes in Arabic and Urdu, but they couldn't translate them. Some have said that's still the case today. It was not supposed to be. So we have a lot of looking into, and obviously nobody gets a clean bill of health from the start.
All right. Senator Schumer, I'm going to ask you if you could to stay with us for just a little bit.
Okay.
We're moving up on 724. Some viewers will now cut away for local news. Right here, we'll continue with the special edition of The Early Show covering the attack on America at 724.
And good morning now. Coming up on 725 on this Wednesday morning, Scott Wally along with Carrie Connolly here in Boston.
Good morning, everybody. Scott and I are sitting here looking at the newspapers, obviously on the front page of everyone. I'm looking at here, Scott, the Boston Globe headline, New Day of Infamy, obviously referring to the original day of infamy, Pearl Harbor. A lot of people saying this tragedy yesterday worse than Pearl Harbor, Scott, but many people saying, you know, at least with Pearl Harbor, we knew who was doing this. Yesterday, even today, we don't know.
Herald, and there's the Boston Globe. War was the simple headline in the Boston Herald this morning. Much to be determined here, so much we don't know about what happened, but we're getting new information on the list of people on board the two planes which left Boston, the two planes, one American Airlines, one United Airlines, that hit the towers yesterday morning.
This is not a complete list. We want to let you know ahead. Of course, as we get the complete list, we will bring it to you, but let's go ahead and put up these names here for you. Ken Waldy, a Raytheon employee from Methuen. Peter Gay, also a Raytheon employee from Andover. Richard Ross, 58 years old. He ran a consulting firm in Newton. Neely Casey of Wellesley. Mark Bavis, a BU grad from Providence, Rhode Island. He was a scout for the NHL's Los Angeles Kings.
And a former hockey player under Jackie Parker at BU. And speaking of hockey players, a former Bruin, Ace Bailey, who made his home in Linfield, a longtime scout for the Edmonton Oilers and most recently the Los Angeles Kings of the NHL. David and Lynn Angel, he was the executive producer of the NBC TV show Frasier, one of the original creators of Cheers. The couple was returning from their home in Chatham. Also, Daniel Lewin, the 31-year-old co-founder of Akamai Technologies in Cambridge. And Brian Sweeney, 38 years old, from Barnstable, and 49-year-old Jane Orth of Haverhill, Mass.
Also, John Cahill of Wellesley. The pilot of one of the planes, Tom McGinnis of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. John Oganowski of Dracut. Tara Creamer, 30 years old, of Worcester, an employee of TJX, and Ted Hennessy of Belmont.
In fact, we understand there were several members from TJ Maxx on board that plane. Peter Hansen, Susan Hansen, and their 2-year-old daughter, Christine Hansen, on the casualty list, all from Massachusetts. Charles Jones of Bedford, Bill Weems of Marblehead, and David Reddick of Needham.
Robin Kaplan of Natick. Anna Williams Allison, 48 years old, of Stoneham. Jeffrey Coombs, 42 years old, of Abington. Thelma Cuccinello, 71 years old, of Wilmot, New Hampshire. Alex Filipoff, 70 years old, of Concord. And Paige Farley Hackle, 46, of Newton.
Also, Amy Jarrett of North Smithfield. Jesus Sanchez of Hudson. From Westford, James Hayden and Ruth McCourt, and Juliana Valentine McCourt, Sean Nassany of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and Lynn Goodchild of Attleboro, Mass.
And of course, we will certainly keep you posted throughout the morning as we find out about more of the people on those planes leaving from Boston yesterday. The MBTA, Scott, and Amtrak both running this morning. Logan Airport closed, obviously, along with all the airports across the country. But why don't we see how our traffic is doing out there this morning?
Rich Kirkland, good morning.
Good morning, guys. We have some substantial delays out here. Let me point out a couple of facts. So we're downtown looking at the artery southbound, 93 southbound. There's an accident here. It's been there quite a while. We also had a stuck bus on the lower deck of 93, and that's what it's done to 93s back to Stoneham, and you see they're barely moving. So it's about an hour wait from the end of the line right downtown on the lower deck, 93 southbound. Inbound Tobin was a little bit better, but that's not a still picture. There's nothing moving there at all inbound of the Tobin Bridge. So that's the North Shore traffic. Very slow on the South Shore, Route 3 in Rockland and Hanover as well. I'm Rich Kirkland, WBZ-4 News. Back to Carrie and Scott.
All right, Rich, thank you very much. Let's check on the weather now. Barry Burbank's in the weather office. Barry?
Good morning, Scott and Carrie and everybody. We're looking at a sunshiny morning. It's crystal clear, but it is cool out there. We've got temperatures in Boston around 60 degrees, 61 in New York City. In terms of cloud cover, a little bit will be coming in a little bit later today, but not much through the morning hours. Erin continues out at sea, so we'll be up to the middle 70s today, upper 60s at the coast. We'll get some showers tomorrow night and Friday morning. Friday will be a very chilly day, and that's your forecast.
All right, Barry, thank you. Our coverage continues. We do want to head back to New York City for the latest on what is happening there as rescue crews obviously searching for survivors. Apparently, folks have been calling on their cell phones, and you're looking at live pictures now as Mayor Giuliani says they are working quite hard to get to those survivors.
We will be back with our next local cut-in at 7:55 on both Channel 4 and UPN 38.
Back now, 7:30 on this morning.